Hey, Ecofictologists, welcome back to the channel. It has been a little while since I posted an interview on here, and I'm super excited to be back. And I've got a very special guest with me today. We are welcoming DSG Burke to the channel, who was kind enough to send me her very newly published book, Mean High Water, and I'm super excited to talk about it. So welcome to the channel.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Yeah, we're just gonna have a good time. So yes, the book is newly baby birthday published. How Congratulations, first of all, and how is the week? How is the publication week?
It's really exciting and also incredibly banal. Like I celebrated by getting an eye exam.
How better to celebrate? Yeah.
Yeah, it's been in some ways it's like been like a lifelong dream. This is my first book. And I have to keep like reminding myself. But the journey to this point has been, it takes a long time to write a book, find a publisher, work with them. Um, So, I feel like I should be holding space for the momentousness and it was just another Tuesday.
Yeah, life just kind of continues all around you, doesn't it? It's rude, really.
It's
It's
so rude.
inconsiderate of normal everyday life not to
Mhm.
revolve around this.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. When people like I was at work and people kept coming to like ask me stuff about my work and I'm like, "Excuse me, don't you understand that I'm a published author now?"
Yeah.
No, they don't care.
Oh, well, okay. At least it would have been nice just to have like the one day where everybody just threw compliments at you about your book. That would
Right,
have
like a
been
birthday or something,
yeah,
right?
like
I
a
mean, if
birthday.
it felt a
Exactly.
lot like a birthday. Like I was just like, like you're on a birthday and you're like, why isn't everyone remembering that's my birthday every second of this
Yeah, I
day
am
like I
special
am?
today. Excuse me. Yeah. Well, I mean that is a perfect segue into my first question. Just so we get to know you a little bit, if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself and your journey. You touched upon it a little bit there, how you came to write this book. Yeah, just tell us your life story, please.
Yeah, absolutely. My name's Deborah Burke, but I write I've been working in like climate and energy policy for about 2 decades. And I love what I do. It's a in as well. I mean, I read a ton and have been my whole life. But I've only really started writing in a serious way about I'd say like 8 or 9 years ago. I wrote a memoir my kind of bizarro childhood living on a sailboat. And
Oh, cool.
the memoir didn't get published, but I learned a lot, and I more than anything else, it taught me that I could write an entire book if I really put my mind to it. And so for my next project, which I started in like, 2020, 2021, um, I was like, I'm gonna write a book that I want to read. And I love sci-fi, I love speculative fiction. And because I've worked in climate and energy policy for so long, I like it was a given that a speculative book would have a strong climate lens and would talk about, sort of the impacts um, of climate. And there in some way, I think the story came out of a particular frustration in that in my day job, I was constantly meeting with like brilliant expert level people who are doing like super important, dogged work on climate solutions. But at the same time, I was feeling really emotionally unprepared for the future that, was likeliest on any, given day. And sometimes we have climate wins and sometimes we take several steps back. And so just sort of kind of maintaining this level of like we can do it while at the same time some days waking up and not really and wanting to go like right back to bed. I've been sort of using this metaphor that the book became sort of my own portrait of Dorian Gray, in that I started putting some of my like biggest fears about the future into the story with a humility of like, well, if my little brain can come up with this, then it's definitely not what is going to happen. And but also I wanted to sort of explore like the people side of this. Like, how are people going to adapt? I have a true like optimism and belief in people despite everything. And I wanted to see like what a future, a worst case scenario future in my vision would look like for the people living it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, some of the things that are on the page in your book are quite harrowing. I mean, if we're living in that, if we're heading in that direction, it's pretty dire. But so did you find some kind of catharsis when you were writing it? Like, um,
Absolutely.
yeah,
Yeah.
like confronting the worst case scenario, and then you're like, okay, well, I can write my way around, like somebody can still survive in this world, and now you've got a leg up on the rest of us because you've already figured out how to survive this world. You've already played this level.
Exactly. It's sort of like it was the same thing that was compelling me to like make a go bag. Like I have these like really like I have two bags, one for me, one for my husband, and I haven't really like done anything with them obviously, but like just creating them was like especially in the 2020-2021 period.
Yeah.
I knew that like I live in Manhattan. Like it's very unlikely that, you know, the bag is going to do much for me. Like, how am I even going to get off the island? You know what I mean? Unless I'm putting like an inflatable kayak in there. Like, who's to say that like a bunch of an emergency blanket and a bunch of like meals ready to eat are actually going to like help? But it helped me to do that. And in some ways, the novel served a similar purpose.
I like that. I like the thought of a novel containing your anxieties being your emergency go bag. That's just like, you know what? It might happen, but that's okay. I have thought of different solutions. I have looked the monster in the face, and a
Right.
monster that you've looked in the face is always less scary than one that you've left to
Exactly. Yeah, I'm a
grow in your
consummate
mind.
like prepare for everything kind of person.
Yeah, yeah. Well, so is the character in your book. It feels like. So it can you give us a bit of a spoiler-free summary of the book?
I will try.
Yeah.
It's you read it. There's a lot going
There's
on.
a
It's
lot going on. There's a lot going
multi-timeline,
on.
multi-POV, but the main story we find this woman and she really Nia who really straddles two disparate times. Like when we find her, there's been extreme environmental collapse. There's been numerous conflicts and violence and mass migration and governmental disintegration has happened. Um, but in the flashbacks, we see her in a time that looks a lot like ours. So this is a woman who has has sort of experienced both extremes, and for many of her contemporaries, they've sort of run out of rope. They're like, for so long we've taken human progress as, a given. And now in my version of the future, there's not a lot of hope. And the thing that keeps Nia alive is this quest that she's given herself. It's not like it's not very moral quest. It's not even a very epic quest. She just has a personal vendetta and it keeps her going. And so when we meet her in the beginning of the book, and really the bulk of the book, I think explores, the week or so after of her really at this crossroads, she's she knows how she can fulfill her quest. It's not, but she's not ready to actually do it because once she gets her revenge, once she fulfills her vendetta, what is there to live for? This is what has been keeping her alive in some respects. And so um I'd say that, that's sort of the the main arc. And of course, there's a lot of world building and side
There's a
characters and
lot of world building.
other
There is a
stuff
lot of
going on.
world building. There's it's you really feel every time we shift in timeline, you really feel the shift. Like the baseline moves under your feet when you're reading it. Like when you're with Nia in the present tense, present time. Well, her present time, our future time. um, and feels very everything feels very different, and what you have to worry about is different, and what is a given is different. And I found that very interesting. And one of the main ways that I really felt the difference in time period was the language that you used. And I said this in the email to you when we were chatting, that really jumped out at me, that the people, you can tell what generation people are in by the slang that they use and the way that they speak. And I thought that was super interesting from the craft point of view. From if you're, I don't personally write dystopia, but now that I'm thinking about it, if I were to, I think this would be a craft thing that I would utilize, that like using language as a real indicator for what somebody's past experience is like. So I'd be interested in hearing you talk a little bit about how you approach that, because a lot of the slang that like the younger generation uses is based off of new tech, which means you had to design the new tech to design the slang. So there's the layers of world building even in just the dialogue that you're using. So yeah, I'll let you talk now.
Yeah, no, I'm glad that was a thorough question, because I was like, I have so many answers, but how do I organize them so that it's most coherent? Um, I think, slang is such a useful way to establish, a world. And so some of it just happened organically. Like I said, I read a lot of science fiction, I read a lot of dystopia, and um I like it when uh there's slang. My mom just started reading the book and she's like, I don't really know what's going on. And I'm like, I feel like if you're a sci-fi reader, you just sort of accept that you won't know what's going on for the
Yeah.
first 100 pages. And that's part of the fun, is like, what the heck is going on, right? But so some of it is just, that's the style of the genre. But to your question about like what came first, like honestly, it was more organic than tech and then slang. Sometimes the tech was informed by the slang. Sometimes the slang was informed by the tech. Sometimes I retconned tech because I liked the way the slang sounded, and in my head, or out loud. And um but I also really think a big theme of the book is generational blame. Like part of my inspiration for writing this book is like, I'm a millennial and I'm working in climate solutions, and it's a pretty consistent refrain is like, the older generations are keeping us back. They're not ceding power. They're not, thinking about the future in a way that are the younger, I'm millennials being a younger generation. I mean, I've been working this for 20 years. So like when I first started working in climate solutions, I was like, a little baby policymaker who was just
Yeah.
like, we can do it. And so blaming the older generation is sort of de facto, right? But I was thinking about, well, what about when I'm in my 60s and 70s and I've experienced all the, wonderful things that makes our world today easier. If we don't have those anymore, it's not going to matter all the years that I've spent on climate advocacy to those younger generations. They're just going to see me and be like, why didn't you do more?
Yeah.
Why did you mess up so badly? And so in many ways, and I don't mean to say that Nia is an author avatar, because in many ways she's braver than me and has a lot of different characteristics, um but in the sense of like the years that she's been alive, she is, I put a lot of my own sense of like, what will I feel when I'm in my 60s and 70s if the world is not a better place? And what will the reflection from the younger generations be? And so I wanted to I'm going a little off your
Oh,
question a little
please,
bit, but
please go
to
off,
circle
please.
back to slang, like the in order to really give voice to those younger generations who have, had terrible lives. They've lived through, multiple global wars, and they have tech in their heads and they in their bodies, and that no longer works, and um they've just seen like just constant, death and destruction, and um uh you know super pigs and it's, it would change anyone. It would change anyone. And I think language, can really be a fast way to show cultural change. Um,
Yeah.
there's a chapter in the book that's almost entirely written from in this like war-born slang. And
I know exactly which chapter you're talking about because I was reading it and I felt like your mom. I was like, what is going on? I read
I
it.
mean,
I was like, this
it's
is the
borderline
slowest
unreadable.
speed I have ever read since I was like 4 years old because I don't know what's going on.
In on one hand, like, yes, it is completely unreadable, and I'm sorry. On the other hand, that was probably the most fun I had writing the
I
entire
can
book.
totally imagine that. And that was, I think that was the chapter that, like, it's very obvious in the rest of the chapters too, but that was the chapter that twigged it for me, that I was like, no other character in a different generation would speak like this. And they can communicate with each other in this generation and it sets them apart. Yes, there's this generational blame, but it's also they're not communicating anymore.
Yeah,
They can't communicate anymore.
right.
And when I was reading this chapter, because it's not super early, but it's kind of, what would you say, like 30% through,
Yeah,
40%
I think
through,
it's
something
like,
like that. So you still have the most of the book after that, and having twigged it, having seen the contrast so clearly, it was really interesting to then flip between Nia's past and present, because even the way that she speaks when she's 60 has assimilated some of the slang, but
mhm.
then sometimes she's like, I don't know what they're talking. I don't know what they're yelling at me. I just, it's not nice. It's all I know. And then when she's younger, it's mostly the way we speak now. And it flows through. You don't even notice it anymore because it's so familiar. But then you really see the shift. And yeah, that chapter, I knew what was going on mostly because of the like emotion of it, or the onomatopoeia of it. Like some things sounded violent and you knew that they were talking about something violent.
Right.
um
Vibes, yeah.
Vibes, it was totally vibes, yes. um so I know exactly which chapter you're talking about, but it was very
It's
interesting.
also, I think also I approach that like there, there's a tendency in literature, let's just say across the board, to favor, you know, 23-year-old protagonists,
Oh, a hundred
they have their
percent,
whole
yeah.
life ahead of them. And so in some way, I was sort of exploring this with myself. Like, why am I not writing the typical dystopian that centers someone who was just born into it, And it's because I don't think other than that one chapter, which was A, so fun, but B, like would be insane to, I'm not writing Clockwork Orange here, I don't want the whole book to be unreadable. But I wanted to show like how unrelatable a young person would be after all of this extraordinary change to modern
Mhm.
readers. And you wouldn't necessarily, maybe some people would, but I wouldn't necessarily want to read an entire book from that perspective.
No, well, it gave off a very frantic, kind of frenetic energy, because that's what their life is. Their life has been solely based off survival and fighting and defending themselves, etc. And it's actually using, the more I've thought about it, the more this kind of using language to show generations made so much sense and was so interesting, because the shift that even happens between when Nia is 20 something and when she's 60 something, she's it's it's one generation, and the whole, well, maybe no. How many, what counts as a generation? I don't even know. But it's one lifetime.
Yeah.
And the whole world has changed. And yes, we're seeing already the trajectory, but like comparing what we see as common conveniences now versus what her life is like when she's 60, it's so scary because you think, oh, it'll, in the future. I mean, hopefully not many people are thinking this anymore, but I'm sure there are people who are thinking it. That's like, I won't have to deal with this when it won't be my lifetime that I have to deal with it. But
Yeah.
it will be. It
But
will
it will
be.
be.
And it's just like making it so clear that in one person's lifetime, their entire way of life can change, and they can change so much that they can't even communicate with people who were born into it. And I think that's maybe a message that people who are prefer to stick their heads in the sand a little bit more could benefit from.
Let's hope.
but yeah, so the language was something, yeah, super interesting. And even going way further back than her life. I mean, you don't have to talk about this if you think it's too spoilery, but we do go way back in time. And I was just curious why you decided to include that, because I think when I first got to that chapter, I was like, whoa, where are we? I don't even know what's going on. So yeah, I would be curious to know why you included that.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of reasons that I included it, that some I don't even really remember, but it kind of built a life of its own. And I don't think it's too spoilery to say, like, there's a main character in the book who is from the Viking age, and she's living through a time of a little ice age, of profound environmental shifts. So there's parallels to what she's going through and what Nia is going through. And but like it's not to say like, oh, the climate has always changed. You know, it's more of an answer to that in some sense of like, there's even a character in Nia's past. She goes on a date with this guy and he's like, hasn't the climate always changed, And so why did I include that? I had this idea for this character of like this that mirrored this situation and did sort of build the world back as well as forward.
Hmm.
I wanted to show the human experience and individuals have not actually changed in their humanity as much as it can sometimes feel, and she plays a part by inspiring the group of women
Hmm.
that we meet later in the book. So it was more about like world building and a voice that I wanted to give some pages to. She kind of took on more of a life of her own within the writing than I had intended. She's a little bit of a happy accident.
Yeah, I mean, they do that. Those pesky characters, they just kind of take hold of the story and decide they want a bigger role in it sometimes. Yeah, it's interesting to have a character that's going through like a normal, natural climate change compared with uh, a very unnatural climate change. Um, so I'd be, as a fellow writer, I'm always curious about people's writing process and how their lives intersect with their writing, and what kind of, do you write in the wee hours of the morning, or are you a night owl, or that kind of thing. So would you talk a little bit about your writing process when you were writing this?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a little all over the place. But I kind of liken it to having like a program running all the time in the background. I'm sort of always thinking about writing at some level. And
Hmm.
when I have an idea, like I've solved a problem or I come up with an idea for a character, or even just like a name or something like that, I have I rely heavily on my notes app. And so if I'm not in a position where I can immediately like put it on the page, I just write a note to myself in my app. And then I try to block out long writing times if possible. So, sometimes, and I was doing a lot of the first draft in 2021, 2022. So it was a time when, I was living in New York City. I mean, I still am. And so we were encouraged to be home a lot. So I would sort of like work, for 8 hours for my day job. And then I would sort of switch, it was sort of my way of being like, okay, work day is done. I'm going
Yeah.
to stay in the same place, looking at the
Yeah.
same screen, but I'm going to do something else. And I've I wish I could be one of those people who's like, I'm gonna write 1,000 words a week or 300 words a day or something like that and just stick to that. But really, it's more like a pressure cooker. I think about the book a lot, and then if I'm able to say, okay, this weekend I'm gonna spend 8 hours on Sunday, and I'm just gonna try to put everything that I've been cooking up onto the page. Um, and I mean, it's my first novel. Nobody was clamoring for this. I mean, I hadn't even sold it yet. So a lot of it was just very self-directed. And sometimes it felt extremely silly. Like, why am I saying no to, having going to the movies or whatever, just to sit and put my like dumb thoughts down on a page. And so I once I like started working with my publisher and my developmental editor, and I had like actual deadlines, that was like a really exciting time for me creatively because it was like anytime I wasn't working or sleeping or, doing some sort of social event that I couldn't get out of, I was writing. And so I think when push comes to shove, I can really dig in. Otherwise it's more just fitting it in where I can. I have to fly a fair amount for my job, and I find planes. And if I organize myself ahead of time and say, I know I'm flying to San Francisco, I have 5.5 hours of uninterrupted writing time ahead of me. I need this character to get from point A to point B. That's like the best, but it takes, planning.
Yeah. How long did it take you to write the book?
I'd say like at least a year.
I
Yeah.
mean, for your first book, I think that's pretty good. Most people say like 3 to 5.
Well, yeah, and because I had written the memoir, which did take like 3 or 4 years, I felt like, and I'm glad that this wasn't the first book I wrote because
Hmm.
I learned so much in that process
Yeah.
about, just being more efficient with my time.
Yeah. 100%. What was it? Did you know already that you wanted to be traditionally published, versus self-publishing, or were you exploring all avenues?
The goal was always to be traditionally published. I I think in some ways it's because I really craved feedback
Hmm.
and partnership. And like I know plenty of self-published authors like invest in developmental help and editing, which is amazing. But the nice thing about being traditionally published is the publisher invests in that for you. And also it's a certain amount of validation. I'm like I said, I'm a reader first, frankly, before I'm a writer, and I didn't want to put something out in the world that didn't have a lot of other people's eyes on it who
Hmm.
know writers and who know readers and who know what works and what doesn't. I mean, I had to kill so many darlings.
Oh,
And
yeah.
uh if it was just me, those darlings would still be in there, So and so it's a painful but necessary um part of the work, and I wanted that structure. I also was, hoping to get some other support. Like the publisher did my cover. I love my cover, and I never in a million years would have come up with that on my own. So like just sort of things like that, like having other smarter people get to work with was my one of my main motivators.
Yeah. Well, that's amazing that you had such a positive experience, and that you have a team that supports you and that works with you and that asks your input, and that you feel is like a collaboration. That's really great. Um, did you send it straight to the publishing house, or did you get an agent first?
I it's a small press,
Right.
and so they accepted unagented
Yeah. Nice.
work. Not to like, well, I feel like it's a useful story. With my memoir, I did get an agent,
Mhm.
and she was wonderful. But we weren't able to sell the book, and so kind of like this time around, I was like, I would love an agent, but I'm not ready to go through that again of
Yeah.
like it's so hard to get an agent,
Yeah.
and then for that not to be enough is pretty disheartening. And so I would love to be agented. We'll talk more, but I have another project that I'm working on that I'm planning on querying this year, and I do hope to get an agent for it. And I think it's a little more marketable than Mean Higher High Water. So I have hope. You have to have hope in this business, both in the climate business and in the publishing business.
Yeah, 100%. And keeping hope is, it's a skill all of its own to maintain that kind of hope. Um, I wonder, how much does your work, your day job, inform your writing? I mean, you were talking earlier that all of your some of your anxieties went in, and some of your kind of the people you were talking to went in, and everything. Did the kernels of the story come to you from your work, and for future projects as well?
100%. I'm like I mean there's a few things that I can trace back, not just to my work in general, but to like a specific meeting. Like I
Yeah,
remember
nice.
sitting in a meeting, and the, a speaker was talking about the future of zero emission planes,
Mm.
and and how they're all going to be hydrogen. I mean, this was like 9 years ago, and it still hasn't happened yet. So it's a long road, but I at the time I was like, ooh,
I'll have that,
that's
thank
good.
you.
I got to write that down. So like sometimes it's like literally like I was just like I'd be in a meeting. I mean, there's a chapter in the book where my character is at a meeting about natural gas, and I mean
Mhm.
like the names were changed to protect the innocent. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like there's some ripped from my life moments. I had the privilege to go to several of the UN climate meetings, and so that shows up in the book. So like especially the flashbacks,
Mhm.
you can tell like it's deeply informed by my day job. But also the speculative part as well. It's sometimes I'll be working on a project, and I'll think, what's the logical conclusion to do this? If we don't, and a lot of people channel that into uh you know coming up with a new way to a new policy or a new fix or something like that. And there's a certain amount of my job that is that, but it was nice to have this other outlet of like, oh, this might be a good plot point. And also I mean I feel like fiction specifically, it helps me explore like the emotional dimensions without having to say there's one right answer, or that there's one clear villain.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And and I guess your job can provide the solutions too, or can help provide the hope that it is survivable kind of thing. Because if you're working in climate solutions, you're looking for the new tech that's going to or the new method of dealing with how the world is changing that is hopefully going to support us in the future. So
Well, and I've already seen a lot of change, right? Like when I first started working in this space, it was all about mitigation. How do we just turn the ship? We got to turn the ship. And we have turned the ship a little bit, but not as much as we should have. And now folks are continuing to talk about mitigation. There's still plenty of opportunities for mitigation. Renewable energy, despite all odds, is going like gangbusters, especially internationally, or outside the US, I should say. But there's a lot more conversation about adaptation, about resiliency, about how do we live in this new version of the future, even though we're not totally sure what it's going to look like. And in in some ways, that's just that in and of itself has been a massive shift for me and for the people that I learn from. Like, how do we continue to pivot whilst recognizing that some things have just irrevocably changed?
yeah, yeah. And do you think that's the role of dystopian fiction? That kind of like this is a future we're going to have to deal with, and let's look at it in a um, you have your spectrum of hopeful to completely hopeless fiction, and dystopian is more not necessarily hopeless, but it's a little bit more gritty when we're
Yeah.
looking at the future. But do you see that as being dystopian's role? That like this is we're gonna have to deal with this one way or another, and if it turns out like this, what have we got up our sleeves?
Absolutely. I think it can play a real cautionary tale. I'm thinking of, some of the my favorite dystopian fiction was written in like the 1970s. And a lot of times speculative fiction, whether it's dystopian or not, says a lot more about the time that it's being written than any actual real version of the future, right? I mean, there's a reason we still talk about 1984 long after the year 1984. It's because it's really talking about, like the creeping totalitarianism and control and not, just this is what George Orwell thought was exactly going to happen, right? With the, you know, the bureaucratic fascism, et cetera, et cetera. And so I think on one hand, yes, dystopia can be like a cautionary tale, like let's not do this, you know. But I part of the reason I read it and write it is because I think like it it helps readers it helps me see a part of my life in that future, going back to me saying like in some sense Nia is playing this role of like the me preparing for a future that I might potentially live through. It's validating to be like, am I crazy for thinking this way, that this might be what's going to happen? And I hope if anything that like this particular book like kind of creates an idea that even in the worst case scenario, you can find a way to survive. Like one of my like early taglines for the book was like, people will find a way to survive, but they won't be very happy about it.
Yeah, that's accurate.
Like it's I'm not saying, I've tried to write utopian. There's like Grist magazine does this
Mhm.
amazing like um uh competition for to write about, a positive version of the future. And it's not that I can't come up with one, it's that I have a hard time putting plot into into this
It's a
like
common criticism of
yeah.
utopia that well, that we think utopia is the lack of conflict, and if you don't have conflict, then where is your story?
Right.
Um, and that, you know, there are other versions that are a little bit less idealistic, maybe,
And
but
I still have, it's not like I've given up. I have a goal of writing like, yeah, like a a utopia, because yeah, utopia doesn't mean that everything is perfect. It just means that we've we're continuing on this, I'm thinking more like it's Star Trek, right? It's humans have, I still have daily challenges. There will still be murders to solve and, toes to stub, but there will we've figured out some of the core values that make humans human, and found a way to live in more harmoniously. And like in some ways, like this book shows several different versions of the future. You meet a, a at least three different sort of groups that have figured out their own way to survive, and they have their own rules and
Mhm.
hierarchy and culture.
Mhm.
Um, so I mean, I wouldn't say any of the three are a utopia, but there's certainly ones that I would rather live in,
Yeah.
than others.
Definitely. De Definitely, I can think of one I definitely don't want to
Mhm.
live in the book, at least one. Um, yeah, for sure. I mean, yeah, dystopia is it's the necessary balance, right? You have your spectrum, but you need both sides of the spectrum for it to be whole, right? So to have like a healthy mixture of everything, sometimes it is just sometimes you can just venture into the more dangerous end of opias and see which future see what solutions there are for a particular kind of future.
Yeah,
um
I really hope that readers who come to this, both that read a lot of speculative and those who don't. I mean, I have like friends and family who like have, this is really not their genre, but they're so sweet, and so they're reading it, and they're who I particularly want to hear from, because I, you know, I I'm I think I can become a little numb sometimes, especially when you're a writer as well as a reader. I'm like, I see what the writer is doing here. I see what the author is setting up for the next scene or whatever, and it kind of takes you a little bit out of the just, sinking into the story. Um, but I do want readers to put themselves into that future and say, like you were saying earlier, it's it's not necessarily all going to happen after we've died.
yeah.
There are already changes that are we can observe because of man-made climate change, and they're already affecting us. And I've accelerated it significantly in this book, but I hope that readers recognize that, it could happen to you.
Yeah, well, on that cheerful note, what you teased a little bit earlier that you're working on something new. What's next on the docket for you?
I mean, I have a number of projects. I have enough content to keep uh, uh, all my rabid fans delighted for years. But I have one like sort of project it's closest to getting to where I want to start querying, and I'm really excited about it. I'm working on a project that's a modern retelling of 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. It's also a romantic version, because the
Oh.
original doesn't, I don't think, has a single female character or even mention that women exist. And so in my version, it's a the it's a woman, an environmental journalist who's been saved slash kidnapped by the Nautilus. And in my version, Captain Nemo is hot.
Is hot. Hey, I think that's a great pitch. Just that little sound bite, I think you should use in your query.
Yeah.
Well, Fabulous. Thank you so much for joining me today. And the last thing is for you to tell everyone where they can find out more about you and your book, and any keep up with you for all of your future projects and hot Captain Nemos.
Good. Yes, please stay tuned for Hot Captain Nemo. My website's probably the best place. It's just dsgburke.com. And I keep it updated with book news, just sort of my thoughts about writing climate fiction. And it has all my socials on there. And yeah, I love hearing from readers, even if, you have a disagreement or you found something inaccurate. I'd love to hear from readers, and love to chat about how storytelling can help support the work of climate advocacy.
Yes, yes, we are all about storytelling, supporting the work of climate advocacy around here. Yes, and all the very, very best for publication week of Mean Higher High Water, and I hope it flies off the shelves and you get lots and lots of people messaging you about questions and their their thoughts on it and their experiences with it, and that you have lots and lots of fun with this new book. And we look forward to having you back when your next one is out.
Thank you. And
Oh,
here
cat. Very
he
good
was so
timing.
good about not getting
Right in the
involved.
last 30 seconds.
He's my biggest hurdle for writing, frankly.
Does he lie on the keyboard? Yeah,
And he
100%.
walks across it. He wants to write it, really.
Oh, what would it be like if a cat wrote the book?
It would be that one chapter.
It
That's
would be
that slang chapter.
that. Excellent. Well, fabulous note to end on. Thank you so much for joining us, and I will see you in whatever comes next, Ecofictologists.
Thank you so much.